name is Wing. I'm one of the coordinators of the Fix Affairs. Fix Affairs are Community of Portland, City of Portland, Oregon community resource events. And with that, I would like to welcome our guests from the Office of Community and Civic Life Community Safety Program. Thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you for having us. Good evening. If you're joining us, you are here tonight for Safety Tips for Businesses. I'm Jenny Pullen, and I'll be co-facilitating with my colleague, Sarah Berkemeyer. And I want to thank the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability for hosting us in Fix It Fair again. So we really appreciate the opportunity. So we do have two facilitators. So when I'm speaking, Sarah is going to be navigating the PowerPoint, and then we're going to trade off responsibilities as smoothly as possible as we go through the next hour. We do want to acknowledge that sometimes online learning can have its own challenges. So we are committed to respecting everyone's learning abilities, and we're going to just move through respecting that and believing that we're all going to do our best here. Also, I just want to note that part of tonight's training is on personal safety. Now, typically when Sarah and I cover personal safety, it's a 2-hour workshop. So we're really only touching on it for like 20 minutes tonight. And that's because the topic of de-escalation is in high demand from businesses that we talk to. So we wanted to bring that section to you tonight, but please know that if this is a topic of interest and you'd like to further explore it, have a training for your community group for a full workshop, just reach out to us. We'll have our emails in the chat near the end, and we're happy to work with you on that. And also, likewise, if you are interested in getting a copy of our PowerPoint, we're happy to send you a PDF of that. And if, as we go through, we'll also add some information in the chat, some helpful links and whatnot. So keep an eye on that as we go through the next hour. Okay, so we are going to just talk a little bit about community safety and what we do. And then I'm going to touch on our partnership with the strength programs. So community safety, well, I'm sorry, Sarah, I totally left out introductions for you, my colleague. So I'll just let you all know, I've been with our program going on about 14 years now in community safety. And Sarah, can you introduce yourself real quick before we get into all the good stuff here?
Sure, my name is Sarah Berkemeyer, and Jenny and I work together primarily in the central area of the city of Portland, so including southwest and northwest Portland and the inner east side. And I've been with the program for about 3.5 years. So glad to be here tonight.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So what does community safety do? You know, we're with the Office of Community and Civic Life. We're a bureau with the city of Portland. And we provide a number of trainings. Tonight, you're getting tips for businesses, but we also offer trainings called Neighbors Together, which is a great training for connecting with your community. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in our presentation tonight. Our trainings also include personal safety, emergency preparedness, traffic and pedestrian safety. We've developed a social isolation conversation that's been relevant to what we're going through right now, and so much more. So if a training is something that you think would be helpful for your community group or any group, please get in touch with us. Also, if you're just an individual who would like to learn more, we can also plug you into trainings that we have planned with other groups. So keep that in mind, just reach out to us. We also specialize in security assessments of properties. I'm going to be talking about that tonight as it would apply to your business. It's based on CPTED principles, which stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And we're really excited to talk about that with you tonight. These assessments are typically something that Sarah and I come out and do in person with you. We walk your property. We walk in your property if there are maybe it's a business and you'd like some help with the layout of your store, for example. It's a real one-on-one service that we provide. During the pandemic, however, we haven't been able to do that. However, if you feel that an assessment could be helpful to you and you would like to talk to us about it or get more information or see if maybe we can help through looking at some photos or video footage, please reach out to us. We would be more than happy to help you in any way that we can. We'll do our best. We also continue to foster partnerships with other bureaus, citywide organizations and community groups, and continue to have a holistic approach to safety, in the work that we do. Consultation and referrals are also a big piece of our work. So what that means is if you are problem solving an issue and you'd like some help, you can reach out to us. And if we find that maybe we are not the first and only stop for that problem solving, we are likely to be able to refer you to someone or some organization that can. We really are a great place to reach out to in terms of problem solving and whatnot. The personal safety portion of tonight's training is a partnership with the Strength programs. It's a program that is with the Police Bureau, and they have free holistic self-defense training for women called Women's Strength. They also have a program called Girl Strength, a program called Boy Strength, which is a free violence prevention class for boys. And then they also offer safety workshops, which are free, non-physical training open to all members of the community. They're not gender specific, and that's where Sarah and I get to provide those 2-hour workshops. So the strengths programs are great. Their curriculum is in partnership with them. And all of these trainings and consultations are free. They're taxpayer supported. So thanks to you, we get to do this great work and offer these services to you. So thank you for that. Tonight, we're going to begin by talking about safety for you. So your personal safety. What can you do to keep yourself safe? Also, what can you do in a situation where you are faced with someone who is escalated? How can you use de-escalation skills in that case? The personal safety tips include intuition and instinct, assertiveness, and that includes a 3-step model of assertiveness for setting low-level boundaries, and de-escalation skills. Then we're going to talk about safety tips for your property. So we're going to branch out. Now we've talked about you, what can we do about your property? And that's where we talk about that crime prevention through environmental design. And then last, we'll talk about safety in your community. How can you engage with those around you? Because we all know we will rely on each other at various times, especially in times of emergency. But a great way to connect and time to connect with people is when we don't have an emergency. Let's get to know one another. So we have a training that can be very helpful in that regard. Then we're going to review and wrap up, and we hope to hear from you afterward if you have other questions or input for us after the training's over. So Sarah's going to go ahead and talk with you about instinct and intuition and the role that plays in keeping us safe. I'm going to share my screen here, so just take one moment, Sarah.
Great, thank you, Jenny. All right, so one of our most important pieces of thinking about our personal safety is thinking about what our intuition does for us. And intuition can look like different things for different people. So for some folks, it may be kind of that just slight uh-oh feeling that happens. For some folks, it may be loud alarms sounding inside that say something is not okay. But intuition is the point in which your body says, you know what, something is not okay and I need to pay attention to that. And so again, we all have different kind of responses to our intuition or when it's kicking in. So think about what maybe your response is when intuition is kicking in. What does your body do? What is the physiological response that you have? Is it your heart starts beating faster? Is it you get a little bit sweaty? Is it kind of the hair standing up on the back of your neck? Is it getting butterflies in your stomach? Or is it just a slight minimal feeling that something is not okay? Pay attention to how you respond to situations that are maybe causing you feelings of fear or apprehension. So why does intuition kick in? Why do we have that intuitive feeling about things? It's our body's way of telling us and our brain's way of telling us that something may be out of sorts or may not be okay or may not be safe. And so it's really important that we pay attention to it. And it seems like it would be easy enough to do, but oftentimes we don't pay attention to it and we discount it or we don't take it seriously for a lot of different reasons. If we choose not to trust our intuition or that instinct and what it's telling us about a situation, then we can risk a lot of things. We want to make sure that we can be safe in responding to our instinct, but ignoring it usually doesn't put us in a safer place. So we also want to remember that intuition can be influenced or can look like bias. And so bias is something, whether it be explicit or implicit, that we all experience and that we all have. And we have sometimes control over that and sometimes we don't. Particularly with implicit bias, that's harder to kind of unpack and we don't always know that we have that. And that's kind of the inside kind of unconscious bias that we have about people or about certain things or situations. So one way to kind of address that bias and recognize it and see how it plays into our day-to-day situations, and particularly in situations that may be unsafe, is when you're in a situation that is safe, or you're in just a regular daily situation that you do every day. So maybe it's being on public transportation, or maybe it's riding your bicycle through the city, or maybe it's walking down to the coffee shop down the street. Whatever it is, if it's a regular activity that you do, pay attention to kind of the people that you're noticing around you, the things that you're noticing that are happening. And are you kind of always thinking about certain groups of people or what certain people look like? And especially if you were to have to pick out somebody that you would consider a safe person, if a situation turned into something that wasn't safe, who would you be picking as that safe person? And is it the same person or the same type of person that looks the same all the time? And see if you can kind of look at that bias and expand who your safe people might be. We also want to remember that sometimes we've had experience of past trauma, or we've had a lot of messages that have come from media that have told us that, you know, a certain person or a certain group of people or a certain area of town maybe are dangerous, or we should be afraid of those things or those people. And we want to remember that our trauma response can also feel a lot like intuition feels. And so if we've had past trauma, or if we've been kind of bombarded with those media messages, just keep that in mind and make sure that it's not informing your fear response more than your actual intuition is. Trusting intuition is important, no matter how much embarrassment we might face, no matter how much attention we have to draw to ourselves, no matter if it might even get us in trouble in some way, because it's the best way to keep ourselves safe from the beginning of a situation. There's a lot of different stories that I'm sure we all have about times when we've trusted our intuition or haven't trusted our intuition. And just think about those things and think about why you made the decision to trust it and to act on it, or why you didn't, and kind of what the outcome of that situation was. And remember, as we go along today, talking about safety tips, that intuition is that basic building block of your safety plan for yourself, and trusting it and acting on it is what's going to keep you in the safest possibility of places. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Jenny now, and she's going to talk to us about assertiveness and the 3-step model.
Thank you, Sarah. Now that we've laid that foundation of intuition and really paying attention to what that is for us, let's think about the spectrum of behavior. So what we're talking about is, what is our response to a situation that might be unsafe or uncomfortable? So first, let's talk about what it means to be passive. So physically shutting down. So passive might look like someone who has their arms crossed, maybe they're not making eye contact, maybe they're reading a book or distracted with their phone. They're just like physically shut down. It's almost as if to say, I'm closed for business, move on to someone else, just not engaged. On the other end of the spectrum is aggressive, right? So we're talking about someone who's ready to fight. They're probably going to have their shoulders back and their chest puffed up, likely making a real strong eye contact, and they're ready. Bring it on. I'm going to deal with this issue now and aggressively. But what we want to focus on tonight is that in between, being assertive, which is being grounded, not just physically being grounded in your stance, but also being able to stand up for yourself. You know, when you think about what is the most effective behavior and what type of behavior keeps us the safest, it's being assertive, right? But there is a breakdown for assertiveness. You know, just saying be assertive, or I'm comfortable with being assertive. And what does that mean? And if you're not, if you're someone who tends to be passive when things get uncomfortable and you want to be more assertive, or you're someone who's really aggressive and you think, you know, maybe I need to dial it back. Well, how do you get to that sweet spot, like comfort with being assertive? Well, it takes a little bit of work and it takes some thought. So we've broken it into 3 categories for you. So when we think about being assertive, the first piece is what our brain says and what we're saying to ourselves internally. You know, positive self-talk. It's really important. I'm strong. I can get through this. I can survive this. That positive self-talk can help you survive any situation. Believing that you're worth taking care of, remembering that maybe you have boundaries, repeating those boundaries internally, reminding yourself, I have these boundaries and it's okay to have these boundaries. They're really important to me. I'm going to stick with them. Maybe it's making a safety plan in your head. Nobody knows you're doing it, but you're in a situation where internally you can say, you know what? I can do this. I'm going to make a plan. Maybe that plan involves calming yourself, some deep breaths. Maybe it's some situational awareness, just paying attention to what's around. Maybe it's identifying where the exits are located. All of that can be done internally. Next, let's think about what our body says physically when we're being assertive. 80% of our language is our body language. That's a lot. What we do with our body says so much to others around us. So consider your posture, eye contact, your face, your hand positioning. Think about what you might be saying with your body, especially if you're someone who tends to be aggressive or maybe passive. Maybe someone who tends to be more passive when they're uncomfortable doesn't realize the message their body is sending. So just be aware of the different messages that we can send with our positioning of our body. And then let's think about what's coming out of our mouth. What are we saying? Verbal assertiveness it can be any number of things. It could be setting boundaries. It could be the tone of voice that you use or the volume of your voice. You know, if I'm going to speak calm and clearly, that's being respectful of others with that communication. That's being assertive. Using words like I feel, expressing what your feelings are about something. Using tools like the 3-step model, which we're going to teach you next, or the broken record technique of repeating yourself. What we say and how we say it, how we use our voice, is another type of assertiveness. So you can probably guess this, but being internally assertive, just starting with that piece, practicing with that self-talk, that positive self-talk, by default, the physical and verbal assertiveness become stronger. They start to fall into place. So you can start right now with that internal piece. So let's go ahead and talk about a great tool for low-level boundary setting. And this is the 3-step model of assertiveness. Now, there's many different ways of being assertive. So please note that this model is used for the low-level boundary setting scenarios where physical violence isn't a risk, and the people involved are likely to be people that you're going to see again. So maybe it's your neighbor or someone you're in a relationship with or family member, but you're likely to see them again. And this can also be adapted to many different situations. So typically when Sarah and I teach a workshop, before the pandemic, we were working in person with groups of people, and we would get in a big circle and we would have opportunities to practice in pairs and really get comfortable with the 3-step model. And I'm sorry that we can't do that through a webinar. So we do encourage you to find someone to practice with. But Sarah and I are going to demonstrate to you what the 3-step model is, and we'll break it down for you. But the first step is to name the behavior, name it. The second step is to frame it and set a boundary around it. And then the third is to change it. So enforce that boundary. Tell the person what they can do to change it. So I'm going to use the example of, I'm a business owner. Someone's come into my business and they're not wearing a face covering, which is required for you to shop in my business right now for everyone's safety. So I'm going to pretend that Sarah's come into my business, and this is how I'll use the 3-step model. Hi there, thank you for coming in today. We're so glad to have you. I see that you're not wearing a face covering. A face covering is required in the store for everyone's safety. We'd love for you to stay and shop. I'm happy to provide you with a face covering if you didn't bring one with you.
Okay.
So what I did there is I named the behavior. So you're not wearing a face covering. I framed it. I explained, this is why it's not working for me, right? You need to wear one for everyone's safety. And then last, I told them how they could change it. In this case, I offered a face covering. This is an example that could be used for situations where maybe someone is standing too close to you and maybe you're uncomfortable because they're not respecting physical distancing. So Sarah, would you like to demonstrate as well? Maybe the standing too close to me example?
Sure, sounds good. So in that situation, I would probably say, hey, I noticed that you're standing pretty close to me, and with the pandemic, it makes me uncomfortable if people are standing too close. Can you take a few steps back for me?
That's great. So what you'll notice with the 3-step model is this. Sarah didn't criticize me as a person, right? She didn't say, hey, you're being a jerk, or can't believe you're not following the rules. You know, she didn't criticize me. She just criticized my behavior. Just kind of called it out. Hey, you're standing too close. She framed it. So she explained why that's an issue, why it's a problem. It may, you know, I'm uncomfortable. And then she said how it could be changed. Maybe she could say, I'm going to take a step back, or maybe it's, can you take a step back? There's so many different ways to use this. And using your intuition is really key in this situation, because maybe using the 3-step model isn't even the best option. You've got to follow your intuition on that. But it's a great tool because it takes that piece out of criticizing the person. And you want to make sure that you use each step. If you leave out the second step and you don't explain why, well, then this person that you likely know may continue to do it because they don't have that understanding. So you want to make sure that you're including all of it. All right, so that's your 3-step model for assertiveness. Thanks for giving us a chance to share that with you tonight. Now, the next section that we're going to cover is de-escalation, and Sarah's going to be sharing that with you. And I'm going to get you set up for that here, Sarah. All right.
Okay. So de-escalation is a good option to consider, especially for perhaps that situation where you've tried the 3-step model and maybe it didn't go so well. Maybe the person still refuses to put on that face covering and they start getting really angry. And you have to kind of think of, well, okay, what are my next steps? How can I deal with this situation and keep myself safe? So de-escalation skills may be helpful in that situation. Kind of everything that we're giving as far as personal safety tips today isn't a guarantee to always work, but we hope that it just gives you more options perhaps than you had before to address those situations of safety that you may be experiencing in your businesses. So think about what it means to be escalated. It probably is that kind of aggressive response that Jenny was talking about a little earlier. So very outwardly upset, yelling, angry, fighting perhaps, and showing that with both voice and body. And if those are examples of being escalated, you know, what would de-escalation mean? And it's helping somebody to be less upset, to help them calm down, to help them to think and act more rationally. But it's not always possible. So we have to keep that in mind. We may try all these skills and interventions, and it just doesn't work because the person is far too upset, or as I'll talk about in a few minutes, they are altered in some way, and they just aren't able to be calmed down. So there may be other steps that you have to take if that is the case. So when you're faced with a situation where you might need to use some de-escalation skills, we want to remind you that the goal is to calm the person down or help calm the person down or the situation down, not to solve their problem. So they may be yelling and going off about something that they're very upset about, and you have the answer to their problem and you have all the resources that they need. But it's really hard for them to hear that resolution without being calm. So we really want to focus on helping them get calm before we start brainstorming solutions. So when somebody is escalated, it is it is a process that is happening in their brain, and it's actually things that are changing within their brain. And we want to help them kind of reverse that process that's happening for them. And often people are escalated because past trauma may be reactivated in some way within their brain. And we want you to think about the brain as a model. And I think this is helpful for understanding what the brain is going through when somebody is escalated. So the model is using your hand, and you're welcome to do this at home. Your hand is going to be in a fist like this with the thumb underneath. And the fist is your brain, okay? The thumb underneath there is the amygdala. The fingers right here are the prefrontal cortex. That's a lot of big million-dollar words, at least in my world it is. And to explain a little more, the prefrontal cortex, that part in the front, plans and makes rational decisions for us. And the amygdala underneath here and the hippocampus, which goes down from there, makes decisions based on that fight or flight in times of fear or threat. The prefrontal cortex kind of protects that amygdala and hippocampus. And if the amygdala is kind of exposed like that, although that's not really what happens in our brain, our prefrontal cortex doesn't lift up, but our prefrontal cortex kind of stops working properly. And then something is blocking it from functioning correctly. That amygdala gets exposed and the decision-making becomes more spontaneous and less rational. We want to help people get to that place of calm that allows that prefrontal cortex to kind of come back online and protect that amygdala and hippocampus again to make those rational decisions. So when somebody is escalated, we also want to think about cultural considerations. Some people may talk louder than we do or softer than we do, using their voice in a different way. Somebody may stand with a different posture or within a different distance of personal space than our own when they're communicating, because of the way that they've learned to communicate what makes sense to them and how they interact with other people. Be aware and curious of how people from different cultures than your own may communicate differently, and hold space for this when you're using de-escalation skills. Approach from a place of respect and patience for different styles of communication. As I mentioned before, it helps to be trauma-informed when you're attempting to de-escalate a situation or a person. Consider that that person's appearance of being escalated may come from their trauma experience. And in order to help them de-escalate, acknowledging maybe just within yourself and respecting that that person may be having a trauma experience that's activated, and using that to help make the de-escalation experience more trauma-informed and more successful for everybody involved and safer as well. So the first step in de-escalation is just to calm yourself down. It seems easy enough, right? But oftentimes when somebody is really upset, and if they're in our face and they're yelling and they're using their body language to express how upset they are, that can be really difficult, and it can be really easy to kind of go right up to their level of being upset. So calm yourself down through deep breathing. And at this point, I love for everybody to take a nice deep breath. And feel how that calms you just in that couple of moments during this webinar. Do a body check-in. Are you tense? Are you clasping your fists? Are you gritting your teeth? Is this bringing up trauma for you? And how can you address that in the moment? And use your positive self-talk that Jenny discussed earlier. I'm going to be okay. I'm safe. I have help. I can get through this, and I want to help this person. So once you've found that initial place of calm for yourself, you can begin to think about different forms of assertiveness and how to utilize them to help calm the other person down. We're going to start with that physical assertiveness that Jenny referred to. Physical assertiveness involves using confident, calm, sincere, and alert facial expressions and posture. So we have our shoulders back, our faces up, but we're calm and we're focused. It involves making eye contact, but with a soft gaze. We're not staring anybody down. We keep our facial expressions as neutral as possible, and we can use a specific trick. And that trick is you take the tip of your tongue and you put it on the roof of your mouth. And I know everybody at home is already trying it because that happens with every training that we do. It makes it both hard to laugh and it makes it hard to make an angry face or a sad face. And it also is difficult to talk. So it keeps the focus on that person that is escalated and your skills in helping calm them down. Keep your body movements slow and position yourself for safety, keeping yourself close to exits and behind physical barriers if possible. And thinking about what you can do thinking about what you do when you're nervous or anxious and trying to reduce this type of fidgeting. So do you click a pen? Do you crack your knuckles? Do you play with your hair? And keep that to a minimum, again, to focus on the de-escalation skills. Finally, remove any power positions, such as standing up really quickly when somebody else is sitting down, or standing over someone that maybe is laying down on the street. Depending on your physical stature, imagine how this may feel for someone who is of smaller stature and is escalated. Is there a way that you can neutralize that power differential? And then when we think about internal assertiveness and how that informs our de-escalation skills, it's again, those things that we can do internally to bring our own calm to the situation and help that escalated person begin to calm down. One simple tool to consider is just being quiet and letting that other person vent and potentially diffusing themselves through the process. Maybe they're really upset about something that they've never been able to say to anybody, and you may be the first person hearing their story. So if you have the time and the space to listen to them and hear them out, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes, that could be really, really helpful to getting them to a calmer space. You can also, again, use that positive self-talk and breathing to keep your own calm and initiate your internal assertiveness. When we use verbal assertiveness as a de-escalation tool, we're talking about what we do with our voice and our words. We want to keep our voice low, firm, slow, and even. Low, firm, slow, and even. Again, when someone else is really upset, and especially if they're yelling at us, it is tempting and oftentimes natural to respond with yelling. For many people, it's our natural defense mechanism. So try to resist that tendency to yell and instead keep your voice down low and neutral. Use short, simple sentences that include basic, easy to understand concepts and words. Establish connection with the person and validate their experience. Say things like, I understand. That sounds incredibly difficult. I have been through that too. And that can help the escalated person feel connected and heard. Listen actively, using simple statements like, yes, wow, I hear you, while nodding and staying present. Use the technique of looping and paraphrasing, which means repeating back their concerns to them so that you make sure you're understanding it correctly. Communicate clearly by using their name or other personal information if you do know it. And then acknowledging their feelings by agreeing, expressing regret, empathizing with their experience all along the way. Some more steps in verbal assertiveness can include redirecting someone's attention or creating a distraction. Perhaps you see something else going on in the distance and can point it out, or you need to take a phone call, or maybe you want to call for some help for the person. Anything that helps take that focus off of the thing that is making them upset and can help break that cyclical nature of being escalated. You can also defer to a policy or another person in an effort to distract from the thing that they're focused on. If you need to lie in order to keep yourself safe or remove yourself from the situation, it's absolutely acceptable. If the person gets to that place of calm, then another tool of verbal assertiveness can be brainstorming solutions. So we can get to that point of helping them in that way if we know the resources that might be useful to them. This is only effective, again, if they have already been able to calm down substantially. If your physical safety is at risk, as in your intuition is telling you this person has the potential to become physically violent, remember to maintain 2 arms lengths away. Keep yourself behind physical barriers like a table or a door or foliage, and keep aware of escape routes at all times. Try to avoid any escalating behaviors such as condescending or insincere comments, or body language, or any quick movements, laughter, and of course, the classic saying, just calm down. You can just calm down, which many of us know does not work very well. And in fact, it usually doesn't help anyone calm down and often escalates the situation even more. So now I'm going to talk about when somebody is escalated, but they're also altered. So we get a lot of questions about this. So all these de-escalation skills could work, but what happens if the person is high, or if they're having a mental health crisis? What am I supposed to do then? None of that stuff's going to work. So when someone is altered, meaning they're under the influence of drugs, alcohol, other substances, or they're in a mental health crisis, we have to alter our tools for de-escalation. So it's important, first and foremost, to gain distance immediately and create more than 2 arms lengths away from the escalated individual. Maintain awareness of what your intuition is telling you about the situation and if it's safe to even attempt to de-escalate or not. Remember that negotiating may not work as well because their conflict resolution skills are lessened when they're altered. You may have to repeat your words over and over again for them to understand what you want them to do. You may have to use directives such as, if I'm going to be able to help you, I need you to stop yelling and throwing things at me so that I can hear you clearly and feel safe. Acknowledge their reality by acknowledging feelings and encouraging them to find a space that feels safer, which that may seem very different from your own feelings about the situation and places of safety. If people are altered, their reality is something different than what you're experiencing. They may be yelling, all the fire hydrants want to kill me, and acknowledging for them how scary that must feel and that you want to help them and not hurt them, and helping them move away from the thing that is causing them fear may help them feel more validated and help them de-escalate. Remember to breathe all the way through, especially as you're trying to de-escalate a person who is altered. Take a deep breath at the beginning and keep breathing deep throughout the whole thing. Keeping yourself calm and focused is extremely important when someone is altered. And always call for help. If you feel like you cannot handle it on your own, help can look like a lot of different things. Calling a supervisor, calling a colleague, a friend or family member, a crisis line, 911, non-emergency. There's so many options for who can help in a situation where you feel like you can't do it alone. So I'm going to pass it back to Jenny now, and she's going to tell us about some safety tips for our properties.
Thank you, Sarah. So I've gone ahead and put a link in chat to the strength programs website. Hopefully that has shown up there. And so Sarah, on the cultural differences, it just really took me back to a time when I visited some family. I hadn't seen them in a long time. And a group of family members were having a discussion, and I stepped in and said, you guys don't have to fight about this. Stop fighting. And they said, they all looked at me like, we're not fighting, we're just having a discussion. So it really showed the cultural differences within our family and our styles of communicating. So that's just an interesting one. There's also a children's book, I believe it's called The Rabbit Listened. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a wonderful book that illustrates just how powerful it can be to sit next to someone and just listen. And that's really can be a great tool with de-escalation as well. So it's a great section. Thank you so much for covering that. Well, let's go ahead and talk about safety for your property. All right, I see that we do have about 15 minutes to go here. And I want to introduce you to the concept of crime prevention through environmental design. That's kind of a mouthful, so it's often referred to as CEPTED for short. The goal of CEPTED is to design or alter a physical environment to positively influence human behavior. That's it. We're trying to influence the way people behave in the space. I can't help but think of places like Disneyland, for example. Everything in that space, everything in that environment is intentional. Every shrub, every statue, every different way that the pavement then turns to brick, then turns to pavement, everything's intentional to help influence positively the way people are going to behave. So that's just kind of like a fun way to think about SEPTED. You know, there's so many different aspects of the practice itself. And, you know, Sarah and I have had a 40-hour certification, and that doesn't even touch everything. So today we're just going to touch on some tips, and some of these are drawn from things that we have experienced when we've done assessments with businesses and properties. So we're going to cover basic principles of SEPTED, and that's activity support, access control, natural surveillance, territorial reinforcement, target hardening, and maintenance. So don't worry, we're going to get into this and break it down for you. So when we talk about activity support, this is my favorite piece of SEPTED. I think it's Sarah's as well. It's taking a space, whether it's just, it could be any space, and thinking of ways of bringing positive activity into that area. And there's so many different ways to get creative with this, and I'm sure you've seen it, and whether or not you've really thought about it as SEPTED, it can include things like a community garden. Maybe it's a space that has unwanted activity going on there. So how about we put something positive in there to engage activity? Maybe it's a mural to counteract graffiti, or a traffic calming road mural. Miniature libraries, you've seen those around your neighborhood. Those are great for sharing books and engaging community. Community barbecues or activities for youth, festivals. I mean, the list goes on and on. Sports activities, you can get creative with activity support. So your business might already be engaged in community efforts in some way or another. Maybe you are rolling out that barbecue every Saturday on the sidewalk, and you're connecting with neighbors in your community. And when I say neighbors, I'm not just talking about businesses. I'm talking about people who live in the area too, engaging everyone who's using that space. It might be folks who are unhoused in that space as well, and bringing people together. And you might be doing this already, but I want to share with you something really cool. And that is a program with Multnomah County called STRIVE. If you're not familiar with it, STRIVE stands for Striving to Reduce Youth Violence Everywhere. That's striving to reduce youth violence everywhere. And it engages youth ages 10 to 24 who are primarily youth of color. I'm going to share with you what their mission is, which is that we think that violence is preventable. Peace is possible, and that we are all part of the change. We envision safe and healthy communities where children, youth, and families maintain healthy relationships and thrive with systems of support. And systems of support include you, and me, and Sarah, Fix-It Fair, everybody, right? So what's really neat about STRIVE, it's not just a national initiative led by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. There's other communities around the country doing it. But one thing that they do is they engage youth in SEPTED practices. Pretty cool, right? As a SEPTED practitioner, I think that's really neat. So their working philosophy is that placemaking is peacemaking. So why not look at SEPTED as a way of creating peaceful spaces that everyone can enjoy? So there are youth-led projects through STRIVE that include things like youth-led food carts, street painting, or peace poles that they've created, little free libraries. You may have heard of an event called Coley Matters, which is a community celebration. So if you're looking at ways to really engage youth and kind of think beyond what's already on the forefront of your mind for engagement, get in touch with STRIVE and see if there's a way to engage youth in your community activity support efforts. and we'll share their website in the chat near the end of our presentation. Access control. So with controlled access to your property, you can decrease opportunities for unwanted activity. Some examples include something as simple as an electronic key card system to a building. So you may not think of it in a set way, but that's what's happening there. We're controlling access to the building. Only people with cards should be coming and going, and it's a pretty basic control system. You could have a concierge or a security person at the main entrance to the building to offer help, to make that initial contact with people. But what I'm suggesting here, these seem like pretty high-end options, right? So if we're also talking about physical barriers that create access control, such as installing a fence or a gate, or maybe it's repairing a fence or a gate. In this instance, be aware of natural surveillance. You want to have the ability to see in and out of the property. Thorny vegetation is also a great natural addition for access control. And we've provided you with some images here. You know, it can be planted under windows, near entry and exit points. You want to maintain it at a height of about 3 feet or lower. You don't want to let it get out of control because then it can actually create adult hiding spots. So anything you plant, think about how fast it grows and what kind of maintenance will be involved. If you're someone who's low maintenance, who doesn't want to have to do much maintenance, you want to select something that's not going to require much. Some other good examples are hawthorn bush or juniper bushes. And we can provide you with a list of native plants that are thorny that you can use. If you just reach out to us after this, we're happy to pull that together for you. So natural surveillance is the ability to observe the space around you. Now, when we're talking about businesses, we're talking about maximizing visibility of people, parking areas, and building entrances and exits. So for outdoor spaces, first of all, you want to keep tree canopies high enough for a 6-foot clearance so that you have good visibility across the space. You want to keep your shrubs about 3 feet or lower. So we're keeping that nice open area where you can look around that space and see what's going on. Some shrubs can be quite dense, so consider thinning them out to create more of a screen and less of, it decreases isolation, but it can still provide privacy. So think about your shrubs and think about what purpose they're serving. So if you're wanting the area to be less isolated, you can thin them out. You can still kind of see what's going on, but you could still have that privacy that it offers. You can also consider a fence that one can see through, such as a wrought iron fence, instead of a solid wood fence that allows, for one to see in and out of that space. And solid fencing may be more appropriate for areas that require more privacy and have less activity. But for businesses, natural surveillance should be considered for storefronts. Consider if the storefront windows are covered with advertisements or if they're blocked by shelving. A good ratio to remember is 80-20 for covering your windows. You want to maintain at least 80% visibility, and that's into and out of the store. A customer should be able to see what's going on inside before they enter and before they exit. Common areas in your business, such as break rooms, trash and recycling rooms, laundry rooms, bike storage rooms, ask yourself when you think about your business, can one see into that space before they enter it? If they're in that space, using it, can people passing by get a sense that there's someone there or what's taking place in there before they enter? So if you do have areas like that are possibly isolated, there's some low-cost remedies. And the first is you can simply open the door and block it open. Now, if that goes against fire code, which is something you'd want to check into, then maybe that's not an option. But if that is an option, then go for it. A more costly option would be replacing the door with a door that has a window, which you can see pictured, or maybe it's installing a window in an existing door. I'm not sure how much that would cost. You'd probably spend the same amount of money just buying a new door. But what that does is it reduces that isolation for your employees as they use that space. Now, if you have other areas that are isolated, a common one that Sarah and I see when we do assessments of properties is the rear exit, where employees tend to come and go to leave the building. And that rear exit door, it should open up into a well-lit area so that when people are leaving at night, they're not walking out into a dark space. You should also consider the visual. So can they see out that back door before they exit? And if they can't, a very low-cost solution is to install an eye viewer in that door. So you want to pair that with good lighting, and they're able to take a look out, see if anyone's out there before they walk into that space. Lined corners are also a concern for interior stairwells. And that's another thing that pops up quite a bit when we do assessments. People will take the shortest path to their destination, and it's not uncommon for folks to cut through stairwells to get from one place to another in a building. Think about your stairwell. Can you see what's around the corner before you turn that corner? And if you can't, you should consider installing some convex mirrors. If you're not familiar with what a convex mirror is, you've probably seen them in a parking garage. It's that kind of half of a kind of a bubbled mirror that gives you a nice view of the area. And you can go online, they're relatively low cost. I think your big box stores sell them as well. But that's a great solution for those stairwells that tend to be isolated and have blind corners. Also, lighting is a consideration for natural surveillance. So most importantly, have a regular maintenance schedule for your lighting to check and replace bulbs, but also clean out your light covers so that you're getting the full impact of your lighting. Install tamper-proof light covers in areas where lights tend to be vandalized or where they're within reach. So it's good to invest a little bit more in those tamper-proof covers or fixtures. Your lighting should create a soft glow. It should reflect the natural colors of the environment. And a good rule of thumb for common areas is that you should have enough light to read the headline of a newspaper when it's dark out. So those are some good tips for you that we often share with folks when we do assessments and we're taking a look at lighting. And be a good neighbor. If you're looking at installing new lights or changing your lighting in some way, consider who that might impact the most, which would be homes or businesses that are nearby. So let them know you're going to make some changes, and you want to avoid offensive lighting. So ask them for feedback. And also your neighbors can let you know if a light is burnt out or not coming on as intended. So they can observe that property when you're not there and let you know what's going on. So territorial reinforcement creates a sense of active ownership of the space. Most commonly, this is the use of landscape and design to define property lines and distinguish public space from private space. So like I talked about with the Disneyland theme park, right? It's that transition from one material to another, or it's that transition from one type of landscaping to another. So it can be achieved with landscape plantings, pavement design, low fencing. Placing merchandise or activity on the sidewalk in front of your business can also extend the sphere of influence that you have in that space. So maybe think about activating that space beyond your business. Get out on that sidewalk and get merchandise out there, or bring your services out there on a periodic basis. For large business complexes, property maps that indicate the name of your business, the buildings, and where they're located. This clearly states the transition from public to private property. And these maps are also very helpful for first responders. Signage at entrances and exits should be clearly labeled and paired with good lighting. You know, it's an investment to get maps and signage and install it. So let's get the most out of it and pair it with lighting. Also, you'll see, as pictured on the slide, there is an image with some really nice transition from pavement to some pavers and some grass into, I believe it's a condominium complex there. And it's a really great example of how they are actually welcoming the public into their private space, but they're also establishing guidelines for expected behavior. You'll notice that their signage doesn't say like private property, stay out. It actually says, please respect the neighbors. So this is a property that's along a very popular walking area for the public. So they have decided to kind of welcome folks onto their property, but also establish the guidelines for behaving there as well, which is pretty cool. Target hardening is when we focus on deterring entry or access into a space. So it's pretty simple here. We're really talking about your locks, your door locks, your window locks. You know, you can install secondary window locks and deadbolts for door, or excuse me, locks for doors. Think about your door hinges. When we do assessments of properties, sometimes we discover that exterior doors have the hinges on the outside. Sometimes that can be problematic. It just depends on the design of the door. But when you walk around your property and assess your doors and locks, ensure that the throw on the lock is a minimum of 1 inch long to make the connection even stronger. It's very common for them to come with a 1/2 inch throw. So you'll see pictured there with a measuring tape what we're talking about. Additionally, secondary locks can be added to your windows and your sliding doors, and they can be relatively inexpensive. You can go to a big box store or go online to take a look at the different options. One thing that I discovered in working with someone on some SEPTED improvements was that for a slider door, if you were to install a lock like the one pictured, that one actually alters the frame of the door with screws. And what this person learned is that if you do that, it could negate the warranty. So think about that. If it's a pretty old door, it doesn't even have a warranty anymore, then maybe you might decide to go with that type of a secondary lock. There are others that clamp on that can be really effective. What I like is the lowest cost option, which I went to a Home Depot and I bought PVC pipe and had my measurements ready for all of my windows. And I made them a couple inches shorter so that I could have my windows cracked and still have that pipe in the window so that it prevented the window from sliding open. And they had a saw that I could use to cut my pipe, and away I went, and I came home and I put all of those in my windows. So I have sliding sash windows. So that was a very inexpensive way to get some added secondary, you know, target hardening for my home. You can do the same for your business. If you do decide to change out any locks or make changes that could alter the actual, you know, sash of the window or the doors, make sure that if it's a property that you're leasing, that you're talking with the owner about those changes for sure. But there are so many options for target hardening. If you think in terms of target hardening and secondary locks, start searching online, you get carried away with what's out there. What I think is one of the most important pieces of SEPTED is maintenance. You know, if you're going to go to all the effort to go through all the steps of SEPTED and, you know, really thoughtfully plant thorny shrubs and improve your lighting, all of these things are great. And if you pair at least 2 SEPTED improvements together, just 2 of them, it can make a big difference. but maintenance is the most important. You know, you can put in all the lighting you want, but if you're not maintaining it, then you're shorting yourself on that effort. So make sure that you have a great maintenance schedule in place. Keep your lighting on a schedule to check the bulbs and clean the covers, you know, quarterly or every 6 months. Avoid planting trees and shrubs that are going to block that fantastic lighting that you've put in. Trim those that are established and tend to block the lights seasonally. So you want to take a look at things in the summer versus winter. And if there are common outdoor areas that are seeming to not have any ownership, you know, I'm sure we can all think of a space that seems kind of unclaimed and tends to become overgrown. You know, organize a work party. Reach out to other businesses and neighbors in the area and see if you can engage them in addressing those areas together and sort of claiming some ownership over it and some maintenance. And if you would like some help engaging folks in different ways, you can take advantage of our Neighbors Together training. And so Sarah is going to tell you more about that, and then we're going to end our webinar for the evening.
Thanks, Jenny. So all of the things that we've talked about today are options that we can include in our program's Neighbors Together training. And Neighbors Together is just an opportunity, just as it sounds, to get you and your neighbors together, whether it's neighboring businesses or neighboring residents that live in the area. Together to get to know each other, to connect and share contact information and make plans around, particularly around safety issues that you might be experiencing in your area. And so we can provide about a 1 hour long training that just provides some resources that are available in the Portland area related to safety, safety tips, and we can kind of cater it to what your group specifically is needing or what your concerns are. So we would meet with whoever's kind of the leader of the group first to talk about how we want to organize the group and the presentation, and then go from there. So if you're interested in having a Neighbors Together training, please contact us and please share with us what your concerns are and how we can help. And we would be happy to come out, well, to come on to a virtual Neighbors Together training for the time being for you and your group. So with that, I wanted to share this list of resources for businesses that we have created. It is not all the resources that are out there, but it is a good sampling of resources that are available, particularly for small businesses as well. So federal resources, as many of you probably already know, the Small Business Administration, SBA, is available to provide financial assistance and other kinds of technical assistance, particularly to small businesses. And right now, I know that they do have the Paycheck Protection Program available again for folks that are in need of that assistance. The other resource that's available, the other resources that are available at a state level are the Small Business Advocate and Small Business Development Center. And again, you can find more information on their websites to know kind of what they do and the financial assistance options that they might have available. And when I'm talking about financial assistance options in the time of safety, I'm thinking about, do they have financial assistance that might help you be able to make some of these septet improvements that we've talked about, or help create safer space or opportunities for your employees, perhaps. So the other local kind of Portland or Tri-County resources include the Portland Business Alliance, Prosper Portland, the business districts or associations. So that could be like the Central East Side Industrial Coalition, the Historic Park Rose, Selwood Moreland Business Association, the enhanced service districts such as Clean and Safe and Central East Side Together, which provide an additional layer of kind of security and also cleaning services for specific areas of the city. Sorry, I already said the Portland Business Alliance, neighborhood and district coalitions and associations, and prosperity initiatives. So things like Neighbors West Northwest, Central Northeast Neighbors, and all the different neighborhood district coalitions often will offer small grants. And depending on what kind of business you may have, you may be eligible to receive a small grant that could also help you make some septet improvements or create that positive activity in a space that's next to your business. Multnomah County Strive, we mentioned earlier, is another option if you want to maybe include youth in a project related to the septed. And Mercatus PDX is a organization that is devoted to involving and empowering particularly people of color that are entrepreneurs in the Portland area. And so if that is something that you identify with, then that's another opportunity of a resource that may be helpful to you. And finally, sorry, I just lost my place for a second there. Just a minute. Rose City Downtown Collective is an open group in downtown with opportunities to connect with neighboring businesses and work on safety and prosperity projects in downtown. Portland Public Safety Action Coalition is a citywide nonprofit that advocates for businesses and independent community members regarding safety concerns. And then finally, of course, we've mentioned Women's Strength and the self-defense classes that they offer for women and girls, and the Boys Strength program as well. And the safety workshops are offered both through the Women's Strength program and through our program of community safety within the city of Portland. So with that, we are done with our presentation. Our contact information is there on the screen. I also shared it in the chat. And we can stick around for a few minutes and take some questions if anybody has any, or you can definitely contact us after this presentation if you need assistance with your business or you have specific questions about safety concerns at your business.